Hi, I'm Gemma, and this is a chat with Gemma. And yes, I've cut my own fringe. So today's Melbourne Cup Day, and it's just a bit strange. As I've talked about before, for me, being a single person, I go and have a cappuccino 2 times a day. And recently I've retired, so there's not even work to go to. So it's just me throughout all of the day. So I have a cappuccino a bit earlier in the day, and that gets me out of the house, and I might not be talking to people, but I'm amongst people. And then I'll do the same thing around 6 o'clock or so. And you might say, well, isn't that late? And it's just what works for me. Otherwise, I can kind of spiral and get into some depression, and that can just get worse and worse. So it just seems to work. It just seems to break up the evening and have people around me, sometimes lots of kids and whatever. Today was a little bit quieter because it's Melbourne Cup Day. So there was a lot less cars driving around, and a lot less maybe people in shops and things like that. Anyway, I sat for quite a while and having my evening cappuccino, and I got to the point where, I started to kind of come out of my busyness on the computer and things, and because I always take my laptop, and I just suddenly had this feeling that I used to have when I was young. So when I was young and I was first living alone, I often used to go and visit the family, because when you're at that age, you sort of have lots of, I'm the eldest, so you have lots of younger siblings, and so you go home a lot and you do things with the family and that sort of thing. And then everybody grows up and they move out of the area, and one goes this way and one goes that way, and you just don't sort of get together so much. And so I can remember coming home from seeing the family and kind of driving home and thinking, oh, I'm leaving all that noise and cheeriness and life, and here I'm driving by myself into the dark, and I was still quite young, and go into a dark flat, and all the lights had to be turned on by me, and look behind the doors and check no burglars and all of that. Invariably there was a spider to kill. I was on a second floor, and so it just seemed to be a lot of huntsman spiders, and I'd have to do that on my own and all of that kind of thing. As time goes by, you get used to things. It's like a knife. When you buy it, it's nice and sharp, and over time the sharpness of that knife, it blunts a little bit, and so a lot of these feelings are not so sharp anymore, and after a while you don't even think about it or notice it, and you just go home and do what you've got to do. And so I've done that for many, many years. But occasionally, just for some reason, you might have a similar sort of feeling. And I've talked about it a little bit in the past. But today I was just sort of sitting at my computer and thinking, not so much what I felt myself, but that somebody looking at me from the outside would think, what a pathetic, sad person that lady is. And I have had this thought before, but not so strongly as today. I think it was just because it's one of those days when a lot of things are closed and everything does seem kind of quiet, so it maybe made that feeling more acute. But I'm not one to sort of worry about that so much. And my theory is always that nobody's really giving me a thought, nobody's really looking at me, and if they are, I don't really care. And I suppose I feel strong in myself enough to know that I'm doing things. I've got things that I have an interest in and projects I'm always doing and all of that sort of thing. And so I am purposeful. But I do kind of wonder how I look. However, today, compared to decades ago, it's quite different now. You can go to a lot of places and see the odd middle-aged gentleman or senior-aged lady, say, sitting by themselves, often with their, like me, with a laptop, or just sitting by themselves. And so it is much more popular now to just do that regardless of whether you're single, you might be divorced, you might be a widow, a widower. And so it's much more accepted now, I think, that you would do that on your own. I think in Ireland, I remember somebody telling me that, and I've been to Ireland once, very short time, I was there, and in the little pubs there, the culture was very different. I don't know whether it's like that now, but some years ago this person was telling me the culture was such that a single woman or, just a single person would walk into one of those pubs and just nothing would be thought about it. That it was just that culture that you were there not necessarily to pick up a person or to get drunk. You were just there possibly to have a meal, to be in the ambience of sometimes they had music and people chatting, whatever, and it was a lovely kind of homely family sort of setting. Bit different in Australia. You don't really get that even today so much in the pubs, although I'd be quite happy to go and have it because I'm an older woman. I wouldn't feel out of place having a meal by myself in a pub. But it is a very different culture, and certainly going back some decades, it was a very, very different culture. It was very much a kind of working man's world, I would say, and women were kind of looked at. And I even remember going with my mother and my sister. We were on the way somewhere out into the country, and we stopped for a meal at the local. We just stopped in this random country town and went into the local pub, which didn't look anything particularly nice from the outside, but it was all we had to choose from. And we go in thinking we'll just get a meal and get out of here. And I can remember us being just looked up and down by the local country. I think there was only men in there, really were suspicious of us. And, so that's been the culture in Australia. So not such a friendly place. And anyway, so today I just had this memory of that feeling and thinking of myself as this possibly, looking from the outside in, sad and pathetic person. And then I started to take that inward. So, like we can do, I started to sort of think, oh, well, I am a sad and pathetic person. And I know better than to think that way, but, these thoughts come to us, don't they? And then you have to shoo them away again. But it came to me much more sharply today. And I thought, I'm not going to do what I would normally do, which is to sort of just brush that feeling off, so to speak, and kind of just think, oh, that's that same old thing, that feeling I've had a million times before. I looked it in the face a bit and I thought, that is a sad thought. That is a sad thing that's how I live. I have to do this or else I get lonely and depressed. So I suppose in a lot of people's views that would constitute being a sad old person. And also I know I dress a certain way, but I was thinking about that as well. There's a reason for that. So when I was very young, just a teenager, although I went to a Catholic girls' school, they would have dances where Catholic boys' schools would be invited to come. And I can remember going to this one, and my mother was very excited. I think this was my first, dance ever. I'm not sure that it was, but maybe it was. And so she was like washing my hair and all this stuff, and very excited, and got this outfit for me to wear and everything. And so off I go, and she's much more excited about it than I am. So I get there, and this guy just decides that I am his Miss Right. And so he latches onto me for the whole night, and he's chatting away to me and blowing in my ear, and he just revolted me. Whatever reason, he wasn't attractive to me. He was the opposite. He was revolting to me. And at one stage I tried to kind of move away from him a bit, and this lovely, just young tra-la-la sort of guy came along and asked me to dance, and I very willingly jumped up and danced with him. And so then I thought, oh, can I move to another part of the hall or something? And I sort of felt like I had to go back to this guy. So I go back to him, and he's got this look on his, he just wanted to kill that boy. And anyway, so he asked me to go out, and I was so young, I didn't know how to say no. So I ended up going out with this guy and all of that. And so then he would ring me, and so I would nearly have a heart attack when he'd ring me. Someone in the family would say, oh, Gemma, so-and-so's on the phone. And I think, oh, what am I going to say? One time I actually went down the street to the lady I used to, because I couldn't lie to anybody, that I used to babysit for, and I said, do you want me to babysit for you on Saturday? And she said, yes, we're going out. So I ran back, went to the phone, and said, oh, I'm babysitting on Saturday. And I think he finally got the point, and he stopped ringing me. So my solution to the problem was to do the opposite to what my mother wanted me to do, which is to dress up to the nines and look as beautiful as I could, and that was to look as ugly as I could. Rightly or wrongly, that's, my teenage mind's way of handling this, because I just thought, the way I thought about it was that if I looked as ugly as I could, then Mr. Right would see through that, would see the real person underneath, and he wouldn't be so worried about, the outer trappings of nice clothes and makeup and whatever else. He would just look through and see the real me, and he would be the only one to come to me, and the others would stay away. Well, that didn't ever work, but I've always dressed in a very modest way, and I remember going out this is years later, probably now I'm in my 30s, and going out with some friends from work during the day, it was, I think, and maybe it was for the evening. I can't remember, but anyway, so I dressed up for it, and we were going somewhere nice, so I put some makeup on and all of that. And one of my co-workers, I think the next day at work, said to me, oh, my gentleman friend said you looked so nice, why don't you wear makeup all the time? Because I didn't wear makeup to work. And I sort of thought, well, I said to it, I can't handle that. I can't handle the attention I get. And particularly, when I was very young, I had a nice figure. when was 20, I went overseas and I got a digestional complaint in Bangkok, and I always had a bulging belly from then on. But before that, I had a nice figure and I could look pretty, you know. And so it just seemed like it was much too dangerous to look pretty, to look beautiful. And I remember hearing about some girl and she was dyeing her hair blonde. And I can remember thinking, oh, why would you dye your hair blonde? You're going to get all this attention from males. Like males you don't want to get attention from. And I could not understand a female's desire to get more attention from males. I just could not get that. So I've always dressed, you know, not too ugly, certainly not trying to get attention from myself or look spectacular. You know, I never dressed in those kind of very stylish ways or very spectacular ways. I would always just dress passably. And I would use makeup just now and then for going out when it was appropriate and it would be kind of expected. And there are a lot of women who don't wear makeup at all as a sort of a, you know, women's lib kind of thing. It's a feminist thing and it's just not their thing to do that. But I do use makeup on those sort of, you know, outings, Christmas and going out and things like that. But I've always perhaps given this image of being the kind of pathetic, sad person, and I can see that myself from the outside in, but there's for and against my, as I say, coming under that heading, in that I am purposeful. I have lots of things that I have to do, but at the same time I can feel that sharpness of that knife sometimes, of loneliness, of depression waiting in the wings, you know, that sort of pathos, if you like. So I just sort of talk about it. It's a little bit personal, and, you know, I'm being quite open here, but I'm doing it because I thought there may be other people who feel similar to this and have actually much sharper feelings than I do, and feel even some of these feelings even more than I do, and in fact go home and cry, and really do get depressed sometimes, deeply depressed. So if that's you, maybe you can relate, and maybe this helps you to feel like you're not the only one. There's lots of us out there. All right, I'll finish there, and I hope you're not feeling too lonely or depressed. And God bless you, and may God do something nice for you this week. Bye for now.